Welcome to another video tutorial brought to you by thevirtualinstructor.com. Today we're going to be painting the landscape with chalk pastel. The first thing you need to do is pick a good image or to pick a good setting. And you also need to think about your color. I'm going to be using a warm color scheme, which actually is also analogous. So you'll see all the colors I use in this video are from this family here on the color wheel. So the first thing you want to do is you're going to start at the area that's the furthest away and work closer. So that's going to be the background. So we're going to do the background completely, and then we're going to work towards the front. And since we're using chalk pastel, we're able to just draw over each section as we go. So we're going to bring the background down as far as we can into the middle ground before we progress into the middle ground. Now, the great thing about chalk pastels, they're like any other medium. They're made up of pigment, which is the color. The binder is a gum Arabic, and they kind of have a powdery texture, so you can put them on the surface, and then you can take your fingers and kind of blend them into each other, and that allows you to really create some complex colors that look like a painting when you're finished. So chalk pastels are somewhere in between painting and drawing. You're really drawing with them, but you're actually creating more of a painting, if that makes sense. So right now I'm working with my background, kind of just layering the color, trying to get the color as complex and as accurate as possible. And you'll notice that I'm not just putting one color and putting it down and just blending with my fingers, but I'm putting several different colors on top. Once you've got your background done, you're ready to move on to the next step, which is the middle ground. So we did the background before. Now we're going to do the middle ground. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to block in, actually I'm going to draw real lightly the outlines of my objects. And then I'm going to start blocking in the colors for each one of those objects. And even in the middle ground, I'm going to start in the area that's the furthest away and work closer to where the viewer is. You'll notice I'm also trying to keep real loose with my movements. I'm not trying to worry about getting too obsessed with the details. You can't get too obsessive with the details with pastels, or really with any painting. I guess you could get really obsessed with the details, but for this demonstration I'm kind of keeping it loose. And you can see here I'm working from the areas that are the furthest back and working forward. And as I work on them, I'm building up the detail a little bit. But I'm not quite getting too obsessed with the details. Since these are architectural features that are further away from the viewer, you're not going to really be able to see all the little details that exist on the building. A lot of my students really try to focus in on an area and put a lot of detail in an area when really we don't see it that way. Objects that are really far away have atmospheric perspective going on. There's a little bit of atmosphere between those objects far away and the viewer, and because of that, those details get lost in between. I am going to make the buildings that are closer to the viewer here in the middle ground a little bit more detailed than the objects that are further away. That's one of the 6 ways to create the illusion of space, and that's making details that are objects that are closer to you more detailed. Another way to create the illusion of space is perspective, linear perspective. There's a couple videos on 1-point, 2-point perspective available for you at thevirtualinstructor.com. You can also overlap objects. That's another way to create the illusion of space. You'll also notice that objects that are closer are larger in size. That's another way to create the illusion of space. Another way is through color and value. Objects that are further away are usually lighter in value and usually cooler in color, and objects that are closer are usually warmer in color and darker in value. So you keep those things in mind, and you'll be able to really create the illusion of space. Okay, now that we've got the middle ground down, we're going to move on to the foreground. That's going to include the water and some of the boats. So I'm going to go in and just block in my water just like I did with the sky. Now you'll notice that I'm not making the water blue. This is another mistake that I see a lot of amateurs make and students make. And that's just, we think water, well, it's got to be blue. Well, water is actually a reflection of the colors that are around it. Now, if the water is blue, more than likely the sky is blue. If, in our case, the sky is kind of a pink or an orange, so the water is going to be that pink or orange. So I'm really trying to pull the colors that I see in the sky and the surrounding objects, and I'm putting them in the water. Now the water is a little bit darker in value, and it's a little bit of a different color closer to the edge, so I'm making sure to include that, and I'm getting a lot of this information from the photograph that I'm looking at. Now it's probably better to be working from life, to be able to go sit in your landscape and draw, but that's always not the feasible thing to do. So in this case I'm just using a photograph, and I notice here in the photograph there's a lot of shadow around the edge of the water, so I'm being sure to include some of the darker ripples in the water as well as some of the highlighted areas in the water as well. This is going to bring us to the end of part 1 of painting the landscape with pastel here on the virtualinstructor.com. Hope you'll join us for part 2 where we finish up the image.